Ready to go?
Yeah, I'm trying to get your
Look at you.
asks if I'm ready to go, then immediately leave screen.
I just realized I didn't have a drink, and I can't talk for an hour and a half without something to sip on.
I can't drink my coffee. It's too freaking hot in my house. Freaking Texas, man. Call it the Lone Star State because it's like living on the surface of the fucking sun.
Welcome back to another episode of Neon City Gaming Radio. This week we decided we'd take a look at open worlds. You know, the genre as a whole, where it's gone, where it's come from, what exactly is an open world.
No, I want to
Yeah.
say, what, I'm going to stop you. What is an open world game? Like, what the hell even is that?
I mean, a lot of people have different takes on it, but according to one source, Wikipedia, it's a video game in which objectives are freely. You could approach objectives freely as opposed to more linear and structured gameplay. It's moving about the game world freely. The main draw of a lot of open worlds is about providing the player with autonomy, so you can pretty much do whatever you want to do within the constraints of the game rules itself.
That's from Wikipedia?
That's the short version of it.
So, player agency, basically.
Pretty much. Player agency and the ability to seamlessly move around the world without hurdles.
Well, then by that's still a pretty vague and open definition. So, like, I know a lot of people make a big deal about, different games being open world. Like, here recently, Diablo 4. People making a big deal because it's an open world. And I can tell how Diablo 4 is different than Diablo 3. But by those definitions, Diablo 3 could still be open world, right? Because
you had to go between acts, you still had to teleport, right? You couldn't just walk freely between acts and 3, right?
Well, that's true. But then, like, is the map itself, like, does the entire game have to exist at the same point in time?
I would say yes for the most part. Well, before we get to that, let's discuss what some of the open world's grandparents were, pretty much. Like, where did it start? What? Because I mean, opinions differ on. There's no consensus on what an open world is. Because, like you're seeing right here, like Diablo 3 versus Diablo 4 kind of thing. Because, I mean, in the same regard, technically Diablo 2 would be 2 as well. And Diablo 1, because you could literally travel all the way from the first floor down to the bottom floor. But, I mean, that's smaller in scope. I mean, like, first open worlds, some of them, some opinions are based that... You remember the old Atari game Adventure?
Is that the one that had one of the first Easter eggs, right?
Yeah, with the creator's name or whatever.
I just remember big blocky green fields of pixels. Does that make sense? Like, it looked like it was drawn in MS Paint. It was got the cap, right? The feather cap. Is that who I'm thinking?
No. You're thinking much later. Adventure, you were just an orange square on a black background.
Okay, yeah, I am. Yes, you are correct.
Where, like, the square was your character, and then you had to, like, pretty much feel around. My opinion, like, of what probably was the first open world game, at least my concept of it, would be the original Zelda on NES.
Yeah, because that's open world. I mean, you need certain items, but then by the same accord, that would mean Metroid is open world, and by extension, any Metroidvania. Because
I mean, both of those are open world, but they're not open. They're not 3D open worlds. That there's that line of, like, the old school open worlds being the 2D ones, like your Legend of Zelda, your Metroids. But then you also have, like, Sid Meier's Pirates on PC. You have, The Legend of Zelda. You have Ocarina of Time, Donkey Kong, Banjo, and Mario 64. Those are all some early 3D open worlds.
So those classify as open world. by the modern sense?
Yeah, in the sense of like you're able to, without, I mean, obviously there's gates in terms of like stars, needing a certain number of stars or items to get to a certain area. But if you had that stuff, you could, going back and forth with on your own accord, kind of thing.
Well, that seems kind of arbitrary then, because then what about games that don't even have graphics? What about MUDs?
Well, see, in my research for this episode, that was before Adventure. It was MUDs. It was MUDs. Then you have Adventure. Then you have like old school flight sims. Even Mercenaries was one. It was like a vector graphic based space game or whatever, and you could go pretty much wherever.
Oh, you mean like what about the original Elite?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. Elite's the one I'm thinking of. Mercenary is different. Okay,
that's the old Elite was vector graphics, and that was huge.
Yes, that was one of the earlier ones that, according to Wikipedia, would classify. Because for me, like, true open world didn't start until, I guess. Well, on one hand, I feel like it didn't start until like get to 3D mode, but like with The Legend of Zelda, the OG one, that's my best example of like what I would consider.
Dark Frost feeling the entire judgment of the internet coming down on it right now. Like, oh, well, my first open world game was Existential Crisis.
Because, like...
What if I say the wrong game? What if it's not really open world? It's all arbitrary. It's just labels, man.
Well, I mean, nowadays, genres in general are pretty much arbitrary because everything's got some levels of open, which we'll get to that later, but like, it's got a little bit RPG elements, open world elements, like what is a genre of a game anymore? Like everything's multi-genre now. Now that hardware and software allows you to double up, triple up, combine whatever elements of gaming as a whole that you want in your game.
So I guess it's easier to identify what an open world game is not than to define what a open world game is. So like an open world game would not be
Final Fantasy 16.
I don't know, I haven't made it that far. It is linear as hell so far, but I haven't made it that far.
From what I've seen and what I've heard.
From what I've seen, it's linear. I don't want to spoil anything other than I've got myself a couple of icons and I'm enjoying the game. But then you could argue that, like, earlier Final Fantasies weren't open world in the first 16 hours of the game. And they open up later.
But can you go anywhere? Can you interact with any of the towns once you do have open world? Like,
I don't know. I haven't made it that far yet.
Is it, well, I mean, like in Final Fantasies in general, like, what stops you from being able to interact with other parts of the world? Because, like, I guess, let me break it down to what my opinion of open world would be. For me, it's not just the ability to move around freely. I mean, that's a key component of it. But it's also, for me, like, what is in the world? Like, is the world just set up for, like, quest? Like, say, I don't consider Borderlands open world at all. It's got open maps, but I don't think it's open world. Because, like, it's got a linear story that you pretty much go through. You have to do certain mission beats to get to the end of the game. And it's sure, like I said, the maps are open, but like there's nothing to do in the maps outside of just kill random baddies and go between mission to mission.
Outside of the basic gameplay loop, there's nothing emergent about exploring the area.
Compared to like a GTA or a Bethesda title, where like there's stuff in the world to interact with that has no bearing on the main story. If you want to, you can go fuck off for like, hours upon hours, like I usually do in a Bethesda title, and just the northeast part of the map doing like whatever.
How many characters in a Bethesda game do you go through before you create the character that actually plays through the main story?
In my experience, 0.
You don't make any characters before you?
No, I mean like 0 in the sense of like I've never beaten a Bethesda title.
Like, you've never, like, story-wise?
Yeah, story-wise, I want to get up to a certain point to, like, kind of get a feeling of the story, and then I don't care about the character's son to find him. I don't care about his dad.
Fallout 4.
You know, I don't care about like
Fallout 3.
I just do enough to get to my freedom points, and once I have like the handcuffs are off, I'm ready to.
So that's
do whatever and pretty much make it like a sim game.
So that's a good example of your idea of an open world. An open world is once the world is open to you, you can go anywhere, do anything, and still find gameplay, entertainment, and substance in the game.
Yeah, and there's questing and other stuff you could do along the way without having to just do the main quest or stuff that's cherry picked for you to find along the main quest kind of thing. It has more sense of adventure, I guess, than a linear game. Like, to me, that's what an open world game is. It's got exploration and sense of adventure. Like, I could look over there and be like, you know what the hell is at the top of that mountain? You know, looks like there's smoke billowing up or whatever. Let me go check that out. Let me go find. Is that literally a Todd Howard thing?
Todd, you see that mountain? You can go up that mountain. You see that moon? You can visit that moon. That's literally taken from the new Starfield trailer.
Oh God, I didn't know that.
And then the mountain thing I think was from one of the early Skyrim things. But no, I get that. You can go in. So those are good open world games that allow you to experience the world. The game is the world. It's not a game that takes place in a world.
I mean, would you agree, or do you have a slightly different take on the subject?
That's a good definition of it. To me, open world is a little bit more broad. I remember when I was in, my goodness, middle school, maybe freshman high school, we used to talk about video games. What?
That's the old man ding from our other videos.
Oh. Are
For
you
those
editing?
of you who've watched it,
Are you editing as we record?
No, that was to do a meta joke.
So, well, I remember talking with friends and being like, "Man, there are rumors. Can you imagine having a game where like you're walking through the city and every store is modeled? You could look in the windows. There are people walking around." Persistent worlds that are highly detailed and stuff to have. So to your point, yes, because you don't want just big open maps. But back then, we didn't care. It was just like, man, look how big this map is. You know, we didn't mind that there was nothing to do in it. It was cool to have a city. Because I remember playing like Pilot Wing 64 or Aero Fighters Assault and just flying around the environments, enjoying having those big maps and everything to explore. I wasn't, spoiled yet. I wasn't worried about things like Redfall that has a giant map and nothing in it.
Well, but would you consider those titles to be part of the open world?
I wouldn't consider those to be open world because those are map by map. They're just big maps, and you have a singular objective with sometimes maybe a sub objective or quest.
Okay, yeah, so like Borderlands or like Neo kind of thing. Neo versus Elden Ring kind of thing. Like Neo has open world maps or big maps, but they're still like staged off kind of thing.
Because in that same vein, I would argue that the old school Metroidvania games are more open world than some of those games that just have big maps with a singular objective.
I could agree to that. I could totally agree to that. Because, I mean, you can, for the most part, get any of the upgrades in order, right? Outside of a few that require, like, missiles. You had to get missiles, obviously, first, because to blow open the doors and stuff. But other than that, I want to say... Because, yeah, especially the first one I played on Game Boy, that... It was pretty much, hey, you start here, good luck, have fun.
The old Fallout games, you could go anywhere you wanted to. Anywhere on the map. True open world. And when I say old Fallout games, I mean the ones that were isometric.
Yeah, the
like
old
true RPG kind of.
Black Isle. Was it Black Isle Studios? Before they, whatever Obsidian was called back in the day. I want to say it was Black Isle or Black Sun, something like that.
And the only thing keeping you from
someone correct me in the comments.
The only thing keeping you from experiencing the entire game world or everything the game world had to offer were just luck of the dice on encounters or going into an area that had people who would just wipe the floor with your ass.
Oh, look, what's that giant green dude over there?
But sometimes if you were ingenious enough or ingenuitive, there's a word there I'm fishing for, and I don't know if I'm going to catch it.
If you had enough ingenuity, I guess.
If you had enough ingenuity, you could cheese some encounters or work your way through encounters that you weren't supposed to be able to yet. Or through sheer force of will.
About the open world, I guess, is the ability to tackle a quest or a situation the way you want to, the way you want to. You can experiment more. Like there's more experimentation going on. It's not just like, hey, go up to that guy and press B a bunch of times until he dies, or like, oh, do you want to drop a? It's the I can't believe I didn't put that in my notes. The prime example, the modern Hitman games.
So, okay, so would you consider those open world, or would you consider those sandbox games?
Okay,
because I argue that sandbox open world games can be sandbox, but not all sandbox games are open world.
Yes, I would concur there. I recant my last statement then. Yes,
because Hitman is a fantastic sandbox experience because you have maps. Those maps are static. A lot of the times, guards patrol the same way at the same times. Items can be found in the same place.
Do you have subquests in or is it just the one hit that you have to do and you have to pick it when going in? Or when you go into the map, can you just pretty much choose any target you want? I can't remember. I haven't played since like the first new one, and I don't remember. So I'm going based on
the most recent one has some excellent replayability per maps, and honestly the new Hitmans are the way I used to play the old Hitmans, where I would just play the same map over and over again, discovering new things.
Right, trying to find the perfect the perfect for you style of killing. Like my favorite map to this day is still the Opera House with where you start off with a sniper rifle in the suitcase. And you can either go across and get in the tower to snipe the person, or my favorite way, you could sneak upstairs and drop the chandelier onto the singer.
Is that the guy you can also rig the fake pistol to shoot him?
I think so. There was like a ton of different ways to do it.
But go
ahead.
But that's what I would argue would be a sandbox game.
Yeah, I forget that sandbox is its own genre and not part of the well.
That's the thing.
In theory, it's its own genre.
We're always trying to, as gamers, we're always trying to like put things in nice little neat boxes.
Well, that's just in general, we love labels, man.
You got to keep everything in an orderly fashion.
Nice little boxes. Put this box over here.
So
that box over
to help us define it. Because that's really, I think, what the goal of this episode is going to be, is what defines good open world. What is an example of an open world game that you love? What are some of your favorite open world games? Because that will help define the features by looking at specific games.
I mean, the earliest ones were the GTAs, of course, like GTA 3, GTA Vice City, because those were just mind-blowing at the time in terms of openness and things you can do. Like, I used to come home after school, and specifically Vice City, because I didn't own 3, but specifically on Vice City, coming home after school and spending the entire afternoon not even touching the story, just doing a bunch of like random stuff on the side, collecting cars, buying houses, doing the spray and pray, stuff like that. Later open world. Later open worlds would probably be like, well, I mean, I guess because Ocarina of Time too. I love those style too. If those fall under the same umbrella.
But see, if you think they're open world and you would say that's one of my favorite open world games, then that helps us define open world.
It is probably one of my favorite genres in the sense of, how I've said in the past, like, don't waste my time, or like, don't waste my time and don't force me to do things I don't want to do, I guess. So open worlds are my favorite, and a lot of them are like Horizon, Assassin's Creed, well, Ubisoft in general, but we'll get to Ubisoft in a minute in terms of like
there's going to be a whole Ubisoft section.
Bethesda's Fallout. Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas. Those are some of my favorites. So I probably have to say the Fallouts, GTAs, and then I haven't played too much of Red Dead, so I can't add that to the list. I did enjoy what I played, but Freelancer back in the day. That was a great open world game. I mean, on PC, sure you had the first like 10 missions you had to do in a row, and then just like other open worlds that opened up, and it's like, yeah, here's your main story, but like if you want to go just buy gold or slaves at that one planet and then take them across to the other side of the galaxy, avoiding whatever along the way, like you can.
One of my favorite games, I guess you'd call it open world, was Elite Dangerous. I played that as basically a space trucker simulator. I would just buy products at low prices at one station, transport them across the galactic arm to another station where they were in high demand, and sell them at a profit and repeat ad nauseum. Put on some podcasts or some music and just cruise the stars.
Yeah, I bought that. I never got to get deep into it, unfortunately, because it was way after everyone else stopped playing it. I just bought it on sale, but it always looked fun when I came over to your house, and you just be like sitting there drinking your coffee, and you'd be like, "Yep, got an autopilot right now. It's gonna be about 12 parsecs to that next station." And I just got the radio playing, and
if people maybe I'm the subscriber problem. Maybe that's why new people are subscribing. They look at me and they go, "That looks like a guy who plays Elite Dangerous for 6 hours with a cup of coffee and a podcast."
Which, I mean, if I ever got it,
Dangerous is in the title
at the time. That one I wanted to play with a VR headset because it was first person, and
oh man, we had joysticks and everything.
First person kind of messes with me in certain things, but
so tell me about it, because this is going to sound weird, and to anyone who like watches or listens to this, it's going to sound weird because I've been playing video games since literally the Atari. I've only played and beaten one Grand Theft Auto game, and that was GTA 4. I think it was 4. Is that the one with Nico?
Oh yeah,
Nico Bellic. Okay, 4. That's the one I played and beat. That's the only one I've played and beat. Now I've played for a couple of minutes.
One of the least favorite of everyone.
Apparently, like I enjoyed it, but like, what was?
I didn't have the game at the time, so I have no opinion.
All I remember about the GTA series from 4 was flying out of the windshield a lot because I always forgot to put my seatbelt on, and going bowling. I went bowling.
Come,
so
cousin,
many times.
Let's go bowling.
So many times I went bowling.
That's the only thing I know about that is the joke of like, come, cousin, let's go bowling.
No, he would call you all the time. Doesn't matter what you're doing. He would just call you. Like a tank, 4 SWAT vans, a helicopter, like cars swarming you while you're ramping over the top of highways with explosions going off. Phones like, hey, cousin. So what did you do? Was it like emergent? Did you inhabit your character when you played Grand Theft Auto and you just kind of drove around? Because I mean, I liked 4, don't get me wrong, but like the Grand Theft Auto setting just never got me. Like I can see the appeal of it, but like I played the hell out of some Red Dead and Red Dead 2. Like Red Dead 2 is my jam.
Which that's fair. Like for me, like even though I played the majority of the GTAs, like 3 through 5. I know that only sounds like 3 games, but
to be fair, five's been out for quite a while.
Right, but it's GTA 3, Vice City. Vice City was my favorite still. I even played San Andreas, and then 5. But my favorite's still Vice City because of the time period. It's set in like the 80s, like the whole cocaine-filled Vice, neon lights and everything. It's voiced. The main character is voiced by rest in peace, Ray Liotta. Ray Liotta.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Ray Liotta does the main character's voice in GTA Vice City, and so that's part of the reason why I love it.
Oh man!
And then just the setting and the time period, like the music's bombastic, and I love it. It's that new wave. I mean, it's got other stuff too, but I always stuck to like the new wave and like other style, that kind of style music, because I can listen to like classic rock in pretty much anything. Like I don't need to go back to that to play classic rock.
There was
a lot of side stuff to do, and then like because they were good about making the map have like you'd be driving around doing whatever, and then you're like, oh, that's a military base over there. I wonder if I can sneak in there and steal that helicopter or that tank. And you can. It's going to be dangerous, but you can do it.
That is called emergent gameplay. And you get that a lot in the Bethesda titles, too. Because I have beaten the main story in Fallout 3 and Oblivion, Morrowind, and Skyrim with exactly one character in each game. Every other... And I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours in those games. And I've only beaten the main story once. Because there's so much to do. There's so much emergent gameplay. You can go through the entire game and never touch the main story. And I know it sounds like there's some people watching this like,
that's how I played those games, was never touch the main
that's
story.
how you play a Bethesda games. But you have to understand, Skyrim's been out for so long that there are people who could be listening to this or watching this who weren't born yet when Skyrim came out. I remember playing an early demo at a gaming convention in Vegas in like 2011, I think, and being so hyped for it. And since 2011, it's been, as of this recording, 12 years.
It came out in 2012, right? Like, I played Morrowind way more than Skyrim, and I loved Morrowind. I also like the aesthetics of Morrowind better than Skyrim, in terms of just like being not your typical fantasy-looking environment. Where, like, don't get me wrong, Skyrim was pretty, but it was like Norsemen, like just typical icy
it's
realm.
The world. The worlds are characters, and I think that's a big part of what makes a good open world game. But that's what the longevity of that game is due to the part that you can create a character, walk out into the world, and you wouldn't need any kind of quest. There's a quest journal, but you wouldn't need it. You could just walk and discover things very organically. Every cave has a story, every bandit camp. But then, on the same account, as much as I loved playing it, this is going to trigger some people. Breath of the Wild. I loved the world of Breath of the Wild, and the story was good. I didn't get that sense of discovery because there were so many shrines, so many puzzles.
It did. Like, I didn't beat Breath of the Wild because, for me, Breath of the Wild's story wasn't really much to begin with. Like, there wasn't much there unless you, like, did the four quests, the four big quests of the dungeons, and then the Ganon.
The four divine beasts.
But outside of that, which that's only probably like, 6 or 7 hours of the entire game. I spent 100 hours into that game playing, and most of mine was emergent gameplay, just because it was the first game to allow you to climb anything. And I would do that whole, like, let me get up there on this, let me climb up that hill, look around, and see what I want to glide to, and then adventure around the area kind of thing. But that's also why I fell off the game after 100 hours and didn't beat it, because at that point I had done over half the shrines, if not more. A lot of repetition, and I'm hesitant to say this because this is also going to be controversial. To me, it was like a Bethesda title in the sense that it was a very wide lake, but it was a shallow lake.
That's a fair assessment. I mean, Nintendo fanboy's gonna fanboy, but like, it's not that I didn't enjoy the game. I loved Breath of the Wild. I played it like crazy, but it was more of a Zen game.
Yeah. Like, let me just chill out for a bit and adventure around.
Actually, I put Breath of the Wild in the same bucket that I put Spiritfarer. I don't know if you've ever played that game. It's a very Zen game. Highly recommend Spiritfarer. But Breath of the Wild was a good open world game that I could zen in. So one of my favorite open world games, Red Dead Redemption 2, and that can be a zen game because I can spend hours in that game just playing poker. I don't play poker in real life. I don't play poker in other video games, but I'll play poker in Red Dead.
It's a good cowboy simulator.
It's an excellent cowboy simulator.
I do wish they were a little less ham-fisted with the animations on every little thing. That was my issue with it.
The deliberation of every motion.
Yeah, because which I get that's what a lot of people love it for, and I just wish there was a toggle to make certain animations faster, because I'm trying to think of a good example.
Getting on and off your horse.
Like
reloading
things here and there.
Just
like,
moving.
I'm fine with
starting to move and then coming to a full stop.
That would be the big one, yeah. Character movement. Like, if the character movement was a little bit more lax, I probably wouldn't care about the rest. Like, because I am okay with the cooking animation of him actually going for. Like, I like little details like that, but like,
speaking of cooking animation, we should skip the cooking animation of Breath of the Wild. There's only so many times I get happy about peppers and onions bouncing around in a pot.
Did they fix that in Tears of the Kingdom?
I don't know. I haven't played Tears of the Kingdom yet because Diablo 4 came out, followed immediately by Final Fantasy 16.
Would Spyro be an open world game? Because the only thing that prevents you from moving around in each of the worlds. I mean, granted, you do have like all the levels are through portals, but you could warp between them freely once you have them unlocked. And the open world.
If Spyro's an open world, then you have to allow things like Jak and Daxter. Any adventure platformer game would be open world.
Well, so long as
the worlds are connected in some form or fashion.
Yeah, I was gonna say, as long as there's some kind of hub, or because like, back to the earlier conversation of Ocarina of Time, Banjo-Kazooie, like all those being considered open world. So yeah, as long as it's a cohesive world that makes sense to move around in, I would allow it. Yeah.
So here's something I don't think gets a lot of.
Oh no.
I know that there are different genres by definition, but a lot of my enjoyment that I get from open world games are actually major driving factors in the MMOs I play or used to play.
Like mini games?
Not mini games. Just the open world and the world being a character and going to explore. I remember when vanilla WoW launched, one of the big thing was just exploring and trying to see what parts of the map you could get to. Like, I remember spending tens of hours just trying to get to the Gnomish airport outside of Ironforge way back in vanilla, like 2004.
Oh, yeah. And specifically taking the tram back and forth, back when the tram was still like a big piece of transportation.
I remember having to run your brand new in Burning Crusade, your brand new Blood Elves, to get to Ogremar at an early level. Oh my gosh, that was a trek. Let me tell you. That was
probably the thing that drew me the most up to WoW versus other MMOs, was the fact that the world was cohesive and
somewhat familiar.
Somewhat familiar, cohesive. You could go anywhere relatively easy as long as you stick to the pathways. It wasn't the whole, like, don't get me wrong, I loved Gears. Shit, what's it called?
I was about to say, Gears of War is not open world. I will fight you on that.
Guild Wars, that's the word I'm looking for. Guild Wars 1.
Okay.
I love Guild Wars 1, but
see, that's not open world. That is
that's not open world to me. Like,
yeah.
Because, it's the instance. You can only have someone, like, you can't interact with anyone outside the main town unless you're in a party together. Which I guess
that in the maps were pretty linear. I remember Guild Wars 1 being pretty linear because I remember our guild made all its money on running people from town to town on set paths. So let's talk about the side play, the specific side play, because we were talking about Red Dead Redemption earlier, about poker. The original one had horseshoes. We talked about bowling. Do you like those?
The
Do
restaurants,
you not like
working
those?
out. I like them as long as they're optional. Like, allow me to go in and interact with them when I would like to, rather than, like, say, for example, San Andreas. If you had to eat to survive, that would suck. But the fact that I could go in and get fat off of fast food and burgers, and my character would literally get fat, and then I would have to go work out at the gym to lose the weight, that was interesting. But, like, you didn't have to do that. Like, it wasn't, as far as I remember, granted, I never beat the game, but as far as I recall, you didn't have to do that. So it was just...
I mean, you don't have to lose weight in real life. It's just, if you want to live to see 70, come on.
Right? But,
I say that as long as knowing full well I have multiple chins, okay? I'm aware.
So the beard comes in handy. It hides them, right?
Yeah.
That's my excuse. But yeah, as long as it's well done and optional is my thing. Like, maybe you could have one or two just to show me what they're like as part of the main quest line or whatever. But
I think they should have they should be enjoyable, number one. Don't just throw them in there just to have them. Because let me tell you, I just finished Jedi Survivor. Now, I don't know if you would classify Jedi Survivor as open world, To me, it's more like the old school Castlevania or Metroidvania type games, where the whole world's there. You can go, but you need certain abilities or items to get to certain areas, and to traverse certain areas. They have
I still classify, because I mean, the games we said earlier have certain gatekeeping points like that,
right,
where it's like you have to. I mean, Metroid and everything else. So
right, so you can go anywhere. So I
them.
would classify. You go to different planets, and they have huge open maps too. With
They also
a lot
have
of
fast travel now in this one, right? Didn't they fix that? Because the first game didn't have fast travel. And
there is fast travel in this one. Well, the maps are much bigger.
Good, because the maps were already big in the new Fallen Order. Excuse me. Like, especially like some of the maps where you're like, oh, I need to get over here, but I have to go all the way over here, go back down that stupid slide again, and then go over here,
God help you if you didn't open up that shortcut.
Yeah, oh god, I hate. That's the one thing I do. Okay, as a side tangent again, I like Dark Souls style games. I hate the whole like, we're gonna keep you stuck in this one path until you open that one freaking door or whatever to shortcut the entire thing. I hate that.
So
Great,
Jedi Survivor,
so
Jedi Survivor has that. No, Elden Ring's open world. Elden Ring is so
that's
open world.
I haven't
you can skip the entire first main castle. You can just walk around it.
It's still on my to-do list because, like I said, these style of games are my favorite. And then I also like tight controls, and usually From Software has good tight controls.
So let's get back to side activities. We were talking about Jedi Survivor, and they have shoehorned in not really fishing, but fishing. There's another character that fishes, and you find them in certain areas, and he goes and gets the fish after telling you a little story. He's actually one of my favorite characters. But you can do gardening in that game, where you find seeds and you can plant gardens. Other than giving you access to one challenge, there's really no reason to garden. Absolutely doesn't affect anything. It's just kind of one-dimensional. I mean, it's completely pointless. You can find certain, like...
Pointless in the sense like it unlocks nothing, like you get nothing from it other than the satisfaction of having completed it, like a lot of Ubisoft titles.
Kind of like that.
Or do you actually get something?
It accesses, so if you grow your garden to a certain area, vines grow up to an area, allowing you to climb up and access a challenge. They're like little challenge maps that are like, beat so many enemies using only this lightsaber style or something like that. It was a fun game, don't get me wrong, but like gardening felt just stapled onto the side of the box. Like they didn't even make it in the game disc. They just kind of went, oh, and gardening, guys. Scotch tape, just throw it on the side, and it was that's it. That was just it. Like there was also bounty hunting, which was busted in my playthrough, and so I wasn't able to complete it because she refused to give me any more bounties, and I'm so upset about that.
But at least it was fun activities, though, right? For the most part, except for
gardening, which had absolutely no purpose. And I'm sure there are other people who will hate the fishing part, because you have the main hub is a cantina, and in the center of the cantina is a giant two-story fish tank. And the fish tank starts off with little to no fish in it, and it's dirty green, and it's just filled with algae. And the more fish you get this guy to get, his name is Scuba Stev. The more fish this guy catches, the cleaner the tank gets and the prettier it looks. And I liked him because I like the character, but if that character was not likable, it would be completely and utterly pointless. It does nothing except change the way that fish tank looks.
I might be more inclined for that than the gardening, because I mean I like fishing mini games generally, not always, but it depends on the mini game itself, how enjoyable or obnoxious that is, and then the requirement again, like if it's optional and fun, I'll do it. If it's forced upon me and obnoxious, I will hate you forever and curse the dev team. But
so I'm gonna
in
have
the same
to...
vein, or I was gonna say in the same vein, shifting from like those particular style to Ubisoft. I feel like we should touch on Ubisoft in terms of their open world, because they have a lot of open world games, and they stuck with the same MO / formula for the past 20 years now. It seems
a whole damn trope in open world games is called the Ubisoft Towers. Like that
the towers aren't even the worst part of the Ubisoft open world.
No, but like it's just a lot of Breath of the Wild had Ubisoft Towers.
It did, straight up. Horizon Zero Dawn had towers, but they at least were moving dinosaurs. So
but they were still Ubisoft towers. They were still. This is an open world. How do you reveal an open world slowly? You have towers. This also brings up a good example of what I think is a good open world versus, I don't want to say a bad open world, but it's easier to have a more interesting open world if it's a smaller, denser world. Because the first few Assassin's Creed games,
in what way?
So, like, the first few Assassin's Creed games take place in cities, dense cities with houses, shops, marketplaces, towers, churches, people walking in the city. There's emergent gameplay. There's just
so like lively and like not just empty corridors and shit like that.
But then at the same time, one of my favorite open world games is Ghost of Tsushima, and that has big, wide open swaths of nothing. But it's just pretty.
It is a fantastic game, though. Like
it is fantastic.
One of my favorite games.
But I feel it's easier. So big open swaths of nothing is a lot harder to make into a fun game than small, dense open worlds.
Because I feel like where Ghost of Tsushima. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, go ahead. I
just wanted to say Ghost of Tsushima. In the same vein, I also am a fan of. Which I know this is not a popular opinion, but I was also a fan of Days Gone, and to me, it's similar to Ghost of Tsushima in the sense of the world kind of thing, where it's like, yeah, it does have empty spots, and you might find random patrolling enemies or whatever that you can attack and getting into it, but like the traversing of the world wasn't a chore. It wasn't a chore, and then it wasn't Ubisoft style of, sure, there's stuff on the map to interact with, but it's not like, let's just take a shotgun with every single icon we can think of and just make everything an icon that you have to do. The first Horizon had a problem with this too, where it was like, it had too many side things to do, like to 100% the map or whatever, which is not bad so long as they're interesting or varied, and not just the same thing with a different title or a different person you talk to, kind of thing.
My guy, have you played Assassin's Creed Valhalla?
Of the new ones I've only played Odyssey, which I enjoy the world, but it does have so much stuff on the map.
Valhalla is just, it gave me anxiety because Valhalla launched right when we went into quarantine, and so I had time. And even with all that time, it was just looking at that map. I was like, man, I don't know if I want to do this stuff. Like, can I just get rid of half of it at least? Because the map was just a sea of icons, and it was just too much. I felt like I couldn't enjoy the game. That I couldn't have my emergent gameplay because I was always like, oh, I got to go find this bureau scroll, and then I got to go find this weapon fragment, and then I've got to find this lore piece, and then I've got to go find this one guy to talk to about the history of this church that's out in the swamp somewhere. And then like there were the fun bits, like the legendary boss fights and creatures. I think they added those into Odyssey too, like the Minotaur and what have you.
Oh yeah, I didn't fight the Minotaur, but like I remember it being one of my quest options, one of the optional quests that you could do later on. I need to go back and play that game now that I think about it. The problem with that game is I hate the concept of an open world with a level system, or a gear system, I should say. Not a level system, but a gear system. Because that prevents you from having the truly emergence gameplay. Because, like, oh, I can't go over there and fight that one building because they're 30 levels and higher than me for whatever reason. Like, I'd rather you just lock the door and prevent me from going into the castle and give me like a little quest or a little in-game reason why I can't go in there, as opposed to just be like, we'll level you out kind of thing.
Older games had kill zones like that.
What do you mean?
Well, like older games had, we used to gate certain areas through levels and just power scaling. Because I'd rather have I'd rather have something like that than, like, for instance, Final Fantasy VIII had the island closest to hell and the island closest to heaven. Do you remember those? They were like the in-game.
8 since we were kids, so I do not remember that.
I remember those were the end-game level up areas. They're the strongest enemies in the game. Had some of the best place to get items, and those were some of the best place to get the most powerful magic through the draw system, because you needed powerful enemies to draw magic from.
Okay.
And if you went there too early, you would just get wiped. Like a Marlboro would just bad breath you into non-existence.
That one gets the freedom for that because it's an RPG first
versus an open world.
Yeah, it's an RPG first with open world elements versus an open world with RPG elements. And again, like, the level part's not the main issue, it's the gear sword, because like I could also be the same level as someone, but my sword is like 20 levels old, so like it's not going to do anything. Like, this sword somehow does better than this sword. I get that in like games where like Diablo, where the name of the game is gear dropping, and like your Gearbox games too, where it's like the point is just a bunch of stuff drops out and you can get a bunch of stuff and switch out your crap. I get that, but like on an Assassin's Creed, it shouldn't be that. Like, there's no reason for me to constantly be changing my armor and gear between kills.
Outside of dress up game things, so please keep the dress up game thing going. But
oh yeah, I mean, allow me to keep on changing and have some variation and things to play with, but like I don't need 15 versions of the same sword. You know, like, oh, you got the iron, bronze, copper.
Is that better? So you would rather have the world scale to you, like it does in Diablo 4, than have these guys are really strong. These guys, because Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas had that too, where like there were zones you did not go to until you had like.
Well, I don't want it in a sense of like, which one was it? Fallout 3. I don't want it in the sense of where like I come back to the starting zone and then suddenly the newbie bandits are wearing power armor and shit like that. I don't want it like that, because that's crap. There's no reason unless they built up their own faction, because I didn't kill them in the beginning, and then they somehow in game made sense to do that. Sure, but no, I don't want it in that sense. That level up to me, or whatever you said a while ago. Sorry, I can't remember what you said.
I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention to what you were saying because you were dull and boring. I was thinking about what I want to say.
No, I'm still coming off that medication. So my
brain words no make good.
Yes, exactly. My memory is not
Neon City Gaming, good brain game talk. Make fun happen, eyes pretty.
But and my ADHD doesn't help at all on top of the medication. What were we talking about?
So power scaling versus having open world games that have
zones, scaling to the player versus scale. Okay, yeah. So maybe like a combination of the two, like have certain zones, like maybe make the main chunk of the world that's where anything can come and go. I guess a better phrasing would be like, do you remember the game Mountain Blade? Like, I don't believe Mountain Blade scales to you. I believe it depends on what's going on in the world. Like, this faction built up its power, so its people are geared better than this faction because you took out their king earlier on or whatever kind of thing. So you'll find anywhere from a low-level bandit to a high-level bandit. And I'm okay with that having various levels or whatever, but just don't make it to where that's all the game is about, of like, this zone's level 15, this zone's level 30, this level, while having gear score. I'm not explaining this properly. Like, I wouldn't hate the new, well, I don't hate them, but I wouldn't dislike the new systems of Assassin's Creed if they just stuck to the level system and not the level system plus the gear score thing, because that's where it just becomes blah, like mundane, like boring, and just too much. And then again, it makes it, I never feel like I could take on a stronger person, because like in like some games, like levels, you could be like 15 levels below a person.
You don't feel like it's the edge skill. On.
Yeah, it's not skill, it's just based on gear. Because like there's no like I can get the drop on, like I would get a drop on a dude who's like a big bounty hunter coming after me, but like I jump down to execute him and all it does is because my sword was, or dagger was not leveled up enough. It only took like this little bit of life bar.
And then your armor's not high enough level, so he
in
whacks
Oblivion back in the day. Yeah, if I would be able to kill them with my hidden blade by jumping, or my spear, or whatever in that game, jumping off a building, then I'd be fine. But the fact that it takes into consideration, well, what level is your assassination skill? What level is your weapon? What level is he? What level is you? Like, that's the part that sucks the joy from it for me. Where,
is it because it's an open world, or do you think it's because it's titled Assassin's Creed? Like, if Assassin's Creed Odyssey was just called The Odyssey.
Both. I don't like open worlds where I can't, because again, that takes away the player agency of me being able to do whatever I want to. Like, you're gating me from that because I can't. If it was a Fallout game, I could gank the dude. I could set up a bunch of mines, trip mines around the area, get them to come after me, and then, because you can still go between, let's just take New Vegas for example. You can go the way the game wants you to and level up naturally and fight enemies along your strength level, or you could go straight north through the Deathclaw area, and you could still make it if you knew how to, if you were able to take on the Deathclaws creatively with enough different gear, or avoid them altogether. Versus the Assassin's Creed style, where it's like I said earlier, you're not strong enough. Sorry, no amount of skill will get you there. It's based purely on in-game stats, and that's the part I can't stand.
So what about enemy dispersion? So, like, for instance, in an open world game that's third person with a lot of maneuverability, such as Mercenaries, Just Cause. Did you ever play the Just Cause series?
Oh yeah, I played the first two and then one of the later ones.
Tons and tons and tons of open world, right? Just humongous maps.
Yeah, and it's pretty much a playground. Like,
yeah, it's just a playground.
I played Mercenaries 1, the one on PS2. I guess for modern day example would be Wildlands, right? That's what it's called.
Ghost Recon.
Ubisoft's, Ghost Recon Wildlands would be the closest one-to-one to that, where you can take on the Well, for people who don't know what Mercenaries is.
Oh god, yeah. I guess we have to address that. Mercenaries is like 20 years old now. Oh my god.
I mean, you're a mercenary. You pick one of 3 character mercenaries, and then you have like a laundry list of like 20 people you need to kill to beat the game, and that's it. Like, that's all they give you is like, go however you want to do it. You can gain new abilities and money. Well, that's pretty much it. Get more money, and you can buy bigger guns and stuff like that.
But I meant specifically the mobility. So you brought it up. So we'll use Wildlands. Wildlands is, you can get motorcycles, vehicles, flying vehicles, but it still takes you realistic time to get to places. Whereas in like Just Cause, you're zipping through every place going like Mach 9, right? If you want to go from one part of the map to the other. Yeah, it is, but they're two totally different. They're two totally different mobility systems. Both are open world.
Well, they're also going for two different, like, Just Cause isn't trying to go for realism where Wildlands is.
But the density, enemy density is about the same. You have random patrols. You have random, like, groups of 3 to 4 enemies just kind of sprinkled out in the middle of nowhere. Why the Colombian drug cartel in Wildlands needs 3 guys guarding a boulder out in the middle of a pasture, I will never know.
Hey man, you see that boulder? That's a nice boulder.
That's a nice boulder. Post 3 men up on it.
That's my favorite boulder, okay?
This is my favorite boulder. This is the best boulder in all of Colombia.
That's where my son was conceived.
Wow, didn't need to know that. Those 3 soldiers must be honored.
Trying to think of what would make a boulder worthwhile outside of because video game.
Lost my virginity on that boulder. Oh, crap! What was I talking about? This always happens. We started talking about sex boulder, and then
sex boulder, enemy density, and
enemy density,
world density.
So like, you can have a good open world game, and it can have great gameplay, stuff like that. I love the Wildlands game, but like, you have to go to a base or find something outside of a mission, right, to find your gameplay, because otherwise it's just traversing. And if you're not a high mobility traversal like Just Cause, where you can zip along, its travel time is a not insignificant time spent playing the game.
This is true. That is one of the drawbacks to many open world, I'll admit to, is the ability to traverse it. Like, it ties back to the don't waste my time thing. Like, if it's supposed to be uber realistic, sure, let me get stuck in traffic or whatever. Like Mafia 3, I think it was, where you had like the blinkers and traffic and stuff like that. Excuse me.
Games that didn't need to be open world. Do you remember LA Noire?
I do, but I never played it, so I can't really comment on it.
So LA Noire, really liked the game. I really liked the concept of it, but there are parts of the game where I swear at like the 11th hour, after Rockstar said they were going to publish it, they were like, hey, and I don't know if this is what actually happened, but this is what it feels like. It's like, hey man, you guys got a great game, great story. I love the narrative. I love the detective angle you guys got going. Let's put some shooting segments here, and let's have you drive from the police precinct to the case scene every time. Nothing's going to happen if you leave the straight line that takes you directly to the case. There's just going to be traffic and stoplights, and you're going to get docked every time you hit another car or run over a person, or I don't even think you could fire your weapon. But it was just like the most tacked on, senseless piece of gameplay just to have it. Like they were like, oh, it's a Rockstar game, it has to be open world. But like you could have taken out the driving segments and nothing would have changed.
See, the only thing I know, now I don't know how relevant this is to your argument, but the only thing I could think of in the defense of the open world for that was, I remember reading on Reddit, it was like a couple years back, I would say 3 or 4 years ago, but it was some dude talking about playing that game with his grandpa or his dad or something like that, watching, and being like, oh, I remember this street, because he used to live in the whatever in LA, I guess back in the day or whatever, and used to be a cop or something, but he was like, oh, I remember this area, because it was apparently like a 1-to-1 of like back in the day, and he's like, he would eventually get to where his grandfather was playing the game, or having him drive around just to look at various landmarks and buildings and streets and stuff like that, to reminisce and have that thing. Now, am I saying they should have done all that effort for just one or two people? I don't know. I can't say for sure, but because I didn't play the game, but that would be, I guess, one.
But it felt like it was open world
case,
just to be open world.
Which I can see that. There are a lot of games that fall into that trap. I can't think of any right now, but there's a few that come.
Redfall? I know Redfall was supposed to. They just needed more stuff to do in that.
I would say Redfall didn't have a bad idea in the terms of like, especially once we figured out that the map was only that one little section of the map. I thought it was going to expand later on, which maybe
apparently.
They
so we're working on the we're working on the review of that right now. That video is going to come out before this one, but
hopefully.
I'm in the middle of editing that right now, and I did find out that there was DLC baked into it. There is a DLC map.
Is it that area we always thought about by the helicopters?
I have no idea where it's located, but I just saw a picture of the map. But it's not that huge. It still doesn't make the game fun.
Yeah, because that goes back to your argument, or what you were talking about in density, and then me saying size of the lake versus the depth of the lake.
Yeah, don't give me a big open world and then give me nothing to do in it.
Yeah. Because Horizon, I will say Horizon Zero Dawn fell into that trap of, don't get me wrong, the world was beautiful. There was just not much reason to travel to certain aspects of, outside of like some of those little collectibles. There was no reason to revisit certain areas. Like even certain areas that you could tell that they spent a lot of time, whoever did the world designing of it spent a lot of time on it, but like one was a plateau where only one quest takes place on this plateau, and this plagues me in games in general, where they'll spend a lot of time making this really cool section of a game or a map and give you no reason to be there. Like there's nothing to interact with, there's no questing going on, there's no collectible, no hidden thing, no nothing, and it's a bit of a disappointment.
You want there to be gameplay, right? Unless you're going for a Zen type game, you want there to be gameplay. So, did you ever play Metal Gear Solid 5?
A little bit. I plan to go back to it, but I've not played. It's the least one I've played.
Metal Gear Solid 5 is open world so far as there's one Afghanistan map. Then there's one African map. And then there's, but they're huge. And when you go out into those worlds, the entire map is there. There's stuff going on in the map. There's soldiers doing their duty, doing patrol routes, their tanks.
More so than
that nature.
The Hitman games, or
a lot more. Level? Massive. The maps are massive. So like, but all your missions in Afghanistan take place on that same map. They're just at different parts with different objectives, but the stuff's always going on. So like, say you do one mission and there's like, oh, there's a tank over there. Well, you can use that to your knowledge in a different mission at a different part of the map. Or if you know a patrol's always going to come through at a certain time.
So things are persistent. Like, say if you dropped off a truck over here and left it there for like a later mission, it would still
not like that. It has to be stuff that spawns into the map natively. Now, I mean, in that game, you can request drops at any point. There's certain bosses you can take out without firing a shot. You can just drop supply drops on top of them.
I would love a Tenchu game in that vein. Not in the sense of like dropping shit out of the sky, but in the sense of like an open world where you could just set up your plan of attack.
Isn't that just Ghost of Tsushima?
Yeah, but you're more samurai in that regard, which I do like the fact that you can go loud, so to speak, and then
because if you get discovered in the old school Tenchu games, I mean, good luck. So what's a good what do you want the open world games of the future to look like?
Please stick with third person. I don't like first person at all.
You don't play your Elder Scroll games first person?
Not if I could help it.
Oh wow.
I will, because their third person camera is just, okay. Let me back up a second. It depends on what your character can do. With like, if there's a lot of traversal options, and first of all, if the whole plan of attack is to have your character, like, if say it's Assassin's Creed, I would not want Assassin's Creed first person, because you're doing a lot of climbing, a lot of acrobats.
So it comes down to mobility.
Suck to me, because I mean, sure, it's fun in some games like Days Gone or whatever, not Days Gone, Dying Light, but that's like a one-off. Like, I wouldn't want to do that in every game. It was fun for a bit, but not enough to keep me playing. Versus like an Assassin's Creed, where I can see my character and I can perch on the end of it. Because doing assassination missions, like, for me, first of all, I like to see my character, because unless I'm playing the character as me, and even then, I could still be okay seeing the person. Like, I want to see the person and see the cosmetics. Otherwise, why do I have cosmetics in the game? Like Cyberpunk, my character could look like whatever, and I don't really care. Whatever. In first-person games is the only time I do gear score or defense stats over aesthetics. But if it's a third-person game, I'll wear the weaker stuff just because it looks cooler, like, because I could actually see it. But what do I want from it? I would like to stay third-person, preferably. Don't fill it with just. Don't do an Ubisoft and just fill it with junk to collect for no reason, no rhyme or reason.
No busy work.
If you are going to make it collectible, no busy work that has no point. Like, if it's like no feathers, oh my god, freaking Assassin's Creed 2.
Assassin's Creed 2 and those feathers. And if you do put feathers in the game, make the reward worth it.
Yeah, and then make it make sense. Like, don't put it in there as an afterthought. Give me an in-game reason as to why I'm finding this stuff, why I'm looking for it. Like, back to Horizon Zero Dawn, you're finding it because you come across these little. You've come across the first one, and it leaves a message like on her little computer thing of this life pre-pandemic or pre-apocalypse for this one boy or whatever, and his journey up to D-Day, so to speak. And that was interesting because you're getting a little more lore, a little more backstory kind of thing.
Yeah, it's not just like finding Kurok seeds, Zelda.
Yeah, it's not just a collectible just to be a collectible. It's built into the environment, the world. Do that. Make it worth my while. Make it interesting. Make it, or like, hey, I want you to see this part of the map that we spent 3 years on making, or whatever. It's Mount Everest 1-to-1. We went up to Mount Everest, laser, whatever, and then. Sure, like there's a side quest or something that's really cool. Like go up there, or you get like an achievement going up there. But like, especially Red Dead, you'd come across like these cultists kind of thing, and I would like. I do know that there's more stuff you could find later on, but I wish you could find like a letter or something.
You wish the narrative. You wish the narrative through line was more cohesive.
Yeah, like, because
that's one of the things I was going to bring up is. Open world games are super fun, and you can do a narrative, a good narrative in an open world game, but it has to make sense. One of my biggest pet peeves with open world games is where if you get a mission and it's like these people who are important to you, or your loved ones, or your party member, whatever it is, they're in danger. They need your help. They need reinforcements. They need to be saved or rescued. And then you fuck off and go bowling for 3 hours. Or, go and do side quests and things of that nature. And when you get there, there's no consequences, which makes sense because you don't want to punish the player for allowing them freedom. Mm-hmm. But then there's stuff like in Mass Effect 2, you get a mission. There's a lot of stuff you can do, right? You can have a lot of stuff stacked up on your plate. You say, I need to go to this gas station, space station. I need to go to this planet, finish this side quest.
Beep, fill her up.
But there's a point where your crew gets hijacked. Your crew gets just kidnapped. And you get a mission to go save them. And if you do too many missions before you go save them, they get liquefied. They're dead. They're gone forever.
Which I can see that... I'm sorry, go ahead. I thought you were...
Oh, no, that's what I meant. Like, don't create urgency. That works in Mass Effect. But in an open world game, don't create urgency and then expect me to go do other things. Explore that cave I now have.
A good example is the Fallout series, like as a whole. The entire Fallout series is it's one of my favorite franchises.
I have to find my son, but first I have to build a small town.
Well, it's like you have to find your son, you have to find your father, you have to find
the water
chip, and all that. And it's like, now mind you, the older games were worse than the first, because the water chip one, they give you a time limit. Like, we have 99 days or 100 days worth of water. If you don't find it within that time, we die, kind of thing. But it doesn't tell you that, which I guess that would be kind of giving away the story, but like, it doesn't tell you that you could continue after that. Like, you could go find the water chip and then, because like, for me, it's like, I have anxiety. And that's going to give me anxiety through the entire game of where it's like, well, I'd love to get down to the weeds of like because Fallout, especially the older ones, I like making a charismatic character. I like to talk to everyone, kind of like explore every nook and cranny. And if I have that time frame, I want to get that done out of the way so I can go back and do this stuff. Like back to Fallout 4. If I could have, as soon as I wake up, maybe meet Preston and all that, just get the initial part out of the way, but then beeline it to find my son, and then that's not the end of the game. It's just the first part of the main story, and they expanded upon the story outside of that, where it wasn't a timeline or a timed event, so you can go build your cities and go build or do all your exploration and still make it make sense. Like, I just want it to make sense. Make things make sense.
So speaking of urgency, I think we need to start wrapping this up before we lose everyone completely, or go on another 2-hour rant about something that's completely unrelated to what we're talking about, which is more likely in our case. Any closing thoughts on open worlds?
Well, you never said what you wanted before we close up. You
never we talked about the urgency.
Okay,
don't
gameplay.
Give me the means to do emergent gameplay without pressuring me into a strong start of urgent narrative. You know what I think it'd be really cool is if there was an open world game. Let's say something along the lines of the next Elder Scrolls or next Fallout, where they just out of the gate, after you create your character, this is the world you live in. Because a lot of my favorite mod in Skyrim is what's it called? Alternate start or something like that, where you could be
the No Sean mod.
You could be shipwrecked on a shore as a pirate. You could be a paladin for a church. You could be a random thief. You could be a vampire. And that's just where you start. And the world is all there. Everything's just like it is, but that's where you start. You're not some destined hero. You're not you're not looking for your son or anything like that. The world is there. And then have your character at some point.
That's why Vegas was so good. You were just trying to avenge your murder, and that's not even the end of the game.
That's not there's Vegas was fantastic.
The start of the game, really.
When it worked, Vegas was fantastic. When I didn't have to re-roll a character because the last character got stuck in an infinite loading loop in one of the vaults, it was really great. Or fell through the ground and then it auto-saved while I was in midair. Or, none of my weapons loaded. Or the characters would load upside down and backwards and not talk to you. That game was broken as hell, but I loved it. But let your character, say you give access to the world, all right? Let the character play for a couple of hours, and then you find some some random item that seems insignificant, but you have other characters, you start picking up whispers in different towns and things of that nature about this item. You discover that that's the item you found, and then it leads into some kind of main story. I don't need to be born some super special Dragonborn or be immediately dangled, walk out of the vault and have the carrot dangled for me. I think the open world games work best when the world is the character and the story takes place in it.
I think that's what I love so much about the original Fable, The Lost Chapters, is because starting off, I mean, yeah, you are a hero, you're the hero, whatever, but like, so there is that aspect of it, but you can kind of ignore that because after you get past the academy, like, your first name's Chicken Kicker, first of all.
Chicken Kicker.
Or Chicken Chase or whatever, something along those lines. And then you're just a dude who's trying to be your hero, and to get to the end is just what kind of hero are you gonna be? How are you gonna do it? You know, are you gonna be a good hero, a bad hero? It's not quite what you're saying, but it's the closest I can think of, along with New Vegas. Like those are the only two examples I can think of where it's a good like premise and then have at it. And I'm with you on that. I would like, because then it would make the story emergent as well. Because, well, I guess you would have those weirdos who, well, I say weirdos like me or whatever, who specifically Skyrim, who spends 20 hours in the game and hasn't even made it to the first major city yet to fight the first dragon.
I have a feeling that's 90% of all open world gamers, like Elder Scrolls and Fallout gamers at least. But guys, let us know what you like in open worlds. What drives you nuts in open worlds, and are you just tired of hearing the term open world? Like, let a video game be a video game and enjoy it like you want to, because there's so many differences between different open world games and the gameplay within them that, I don't know, I kind of want to see genre definitions just be suggestions instead of trying to fit things to a box or trying to look, because that's where games are going anyways. I love open world games as long as you make it interesting, and give me a good open world where the world is the character and let me play in it. But don't create just an open world just to have one and then have nothing good to do in it. Redfall. Are you looking forward to Starfield?
Yes and no. Like, it's going to be on Game Pass, so yeah. But I'm not going to spend money for it.
Man, Todd, you're losing this. You're losing this, Todd.
Well, one, I'm afraid it's going to use the same engine that most of their titles use, and I can't stand their engine. And is it going to be shallow or is it going to be depth? Because they keep on doing like, well, you got all these planets you could look at, but there's only 3 real main ones. So it's like, well, which is it, Todd? Hopefully next time we'll be a little more on topic.
No, we won't.
The entire video.
We will never be on topic.
No promises.
Never be on topic. We're going to tangent like crazy, and only the crazy Neon citizens, only the crazy Neon citizens are going to hang around.
It's like, what would we call our fans? Would they be citizens? Yeah, I guess a city. I mean, that would make sense.
Yeah, I like Neon Citizens because you're all brilliant. Just glow.